The Aftershock.
So every single Thursday on the Aftershock, we like to bring you the biggest story of the week, break it down for you, get into some of the nitty-gritty details, and let you know why this, in fact, is going to send shockwaves around the crypto world. This week, we're talking about how Congress today and yesterday have been meeting with these 6 crypto leaders to basically have a hearing and teach a little bit more about cryptocurrencies, because many of these lawmakers have come out and made the decision that they are desperately in need of a formal education on crypto before they can legislate in it. Who knew? We're actually making adult decisions in Congress now. Anyway, these are the 6 crypto leaders that testified before Congress across the last 2 days. You have Sam Bankman-Fried, the CEO of FTX, and he's got his hands in Solana and a whole bunch of other projects. Brian Brooks, who's the CEO of Bitfury, but he was formerly involved with not the Fed. I think he was the comptroller of the currency, and also he was the CEO of Binance US for like 15 minutes. After that, we had Danelle Dixon, who's the chair of the Stellar Foundation. Charles Cascarilla, who's the CEO of Paxos. They're a stablecoin issuer. Jeremy Allaire, who's the chairman and CEO of Circle, the issuer behind USDC Coin. And Alicia Jean Haas, who's the CFO of Coinbase. So a lot of really prominent figures there. I'm not exactly sure how they came to the conclusion that these are the 6 they wanted. But any immediate observations that you had on this, Chris?
Well, first and foremost, until you explained who Brian Brooks was, I had no idea who he was, and I certainly have no idea what Bitfury is. Other
Yep.
than that, I think this is a pretty solid lineup, right? You have Sam Bankman-Fried, crypto staple, massive exchange in FTX. He also, as you were saying, is involved with dozens of other projects in the crypto space. Great one to have. Having Danelle Dixon, I don't know much about her, but Stellar is another, great kind of staple in crypto. We talked about this yesterday, Steve, but having Charles in here, the CEO of Paxos, doesn't make as much sense when you have Jeremy Allaire, who's the chairman and CEO of Circle, because they're both stable coins. And Circle slash USDC is significantly larger than Paxos. So interesting there. And then finally, having the CFO of Coinbase makes perfect sense because to most of Congress, Coinbase is crypto.
Yeah. And it's all very, very interesting to me as to why they settled on these 6. But I will tell you this as kind of the one spoiler to the segment: crypto showed out in this one. These advocates for our industry absolutely represented properly. And the reason why I want to make sure that we dive into this with some granular detail is, like, there's some really high level highlights that came out of this. We're not going to go into every single, U.S. House of Representatives members' questions and concerns, but we wanted to share, I think it's a total of like 5 exchanges that occurred throughout this hearing. And the first of which is what basically was the opening remark. And I'm going to go ahead and read through these for you until we get to the actual back and forth. Chris, I want you to, voice the response of the person in crypto. I will speak for Congress. But the very first one came from Representative Patrick McHenry, who's one of the Republican House of Representatives nominees from the state of North Carolina, who was absolutely adamant that we need to get this right. He said, we need to seek to understand this technology so we can have a serious debate on how we should appropriately respond and update regulations. We don't need knee-jerk reactions by lawmakers to regulate out of fear of the unknown rather than seeking to understand. The move to regulate before understanding will only stifle American ingenuity and put us at a competitive disadvantage. Congress should not be dumb enough to raise a red flag around this technological revolution. We should embrace it, understand it, and we should be the international leaders in the space. To me, not just an opening statement, that's a huge vote of confidence, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's just for whatever reason. And again, this is the Republican narrative right now in the US surrounding cryptos. They are fully on the team of, if we don't get it, we are not going to regulate it. We're not going to touch it because that makes no sense. And I love it. And I also love how he said American ingenuity and put us at a competitive disadvantage, because it shows, right, that he's fulfilling his role. He is putting America first. And he's saying, why well, first and foremost, he's acknowledging that crypto is inherently innovative. It's going to be impactful beyond how impactful it already is, right? So that's great. But he's also putting the country first, which is what he should. And he's saying, why would we harm the country for personal gain?
Yeah, he gave a couple really good examples throughout his opening, and the first of which had to do with like basically countries have done this throughout history. They've raised these red flags at times when innovation really could have just thrust us forward in terms of the way that society's evolved. And one of the examples that I thought was really, really poignant was referring to how England legislated against automobiles back when they were first hitting the roads in London. And it was basically a law that said that you had to have three individuals to operate a car at all times. And it was absolutely fascinating and related to this immediately because we're already over legislating it by saying that, 15 different organizations have a hand into crypto right now in terms of the way that our lawmakers regulate it. So, very, very interesting there. But the one thing that came out of it at the very end of his 5-minute dissertation or his opening address was that he urged his colleagues to not just vote the party line, but be bipartisan about this. He was very, very convinced that there are going to be some people that are just going to straight away vote the party line, and that's going to be the way it's done and legislate to the party line. But there is a bigger impact that can be made here if they do legislate in a bipartisan way. So I applaud him for what he said. I thought it was a great opening address. But let's move into our next one. This one was a really powerful exchange regarding stablecoins competing with the dollar. So guess what? You get to be Charles Cascarilla, the CEO of Paxos. The first comment comes from Representative Richie Torres, the Democrat from New York. One of my concerns about crypto is that it would present a challenge to the supremacy of the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. But stablecoin issuers have pegged their coins to the U.S. dollar already. Is that reinforcing the dollar in a complementary way, or is there still a contradiction here that we just don't see?
And what Charles had to say is what people want is a US dollar bank account. Anywhere in the world, it's the hardest thing to get access to. Tokenized dollars make the dollar more accessible and a very important tool for inclusion.
What do you think about that?
I love it. First off, shout out to Richie Torres, representative from New York. Fantastic question, right? That was just the way he phrased it. He's showing he's not against crypto. He just wants to make sure that it won't harm the US. So, great question. Great way to phrase it. He obviously isn't taking a side. It was a genuine question and an even better response, right? Charles here isn't, taking one side or the other. He's just saying that at the end of the day, when you tokenize these stable coins, it increases the accessibility. And because stable coins are pegged to the US dollar, it therefore is going to kind of increase the reliance on the US dollar.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing that I do want to tip my cap to Richie Torres on this is that of all of the Democratic like lawmakers who had asked questions and had their 5 minutes on this panel, I think that he came at it from the most open-minded stance, and that is really, really respectable. It's actually honoring what McHenry had said in his opening address. Come at this from a bipartisan perspective. Don't just assume that you already know it all. Ask questions. Start seeking understanding. And I think that we all are going to benefit from this testimony. I mean, there were a number of different other statements on stablecoins, but this was probably the most impactful one. I think that that is a tremendous reason why we need stablecoins going forward into the future. But let's go ahead and jump into the next one. This is a really powerful exchange between Representative Ted Budd, who's another Republican from North Carolina, and Brian Brooks, the CEO of Bitfury, and who was the comptroller of the currency and involved with Binance US. Um, Representative Ted Budd began by stating, I fear the current policy of regulation by enforcement is going to force the next generation of financial tech to be developed elsewhere. Where do companies draw the line with this and decide to take their business elsewhere?
And as Brian said, in some parts of the industry, it's crystal clear. There are products that are legal in other countries that just aren't legal here, like ETFs. Quick reminder that stands for exchange traded funds. One of the things that makes crypto risky is that investors may not know the difference between two tokens, so they may want to diversify. We don't allow that in the US. You have to go abroad.
To which Representative Budd then expanded, saying, "So do you believe that the US is behind the curve as compared to other developed nations?"
Unquestionably, said Brian.
You could feel the air just get sucked out of the room when you're watching this back, on the stream. I mean, this was a real mic drop moment in the middle of this testimony. So don't let our acting skills fool you. This was a really, really big moment for the hearing. So, Chris, unpack this for our audience for a second. What do you think from what we got?
So, first and foremost, let's walk through what Ted Budd had to say. He's essentially here asking, not even asking, right? This is a leading question as opposed to the first two where they were kind of genuine statements and showed genuine interest. This is actually a leading question. And our tone may not have revealed that, but it's leading because we've seen Republicans in the last year are very pro crypto or very pro let's take a laissez-faire approach, keep hands off of crypto. What he is trying to do here is he's setting up the question in a way that says, okay, at what point is regulation going to hurt business interests in the US? How is it going to harm our economy? And Brian Brooks had a great answer and said, you know some parts it's super obvious because certain things just are not legal here, so nobody is going to even bother trying to start a business here around things like ETFs. And kind of to that point, right, in vein of that leading question, is Ted Budd follows it up and says, point blank, is the US behind the rest of the world? And, with saying unquestionably, he's agreeing. But to your point, Steve, about it being a mic drop moment, this is politics, right? This is Ted Budd finding the most clear cut way to get this message across to the rest of the elected officials. And it's a beautiful job by Brian Brooks to explain in clear, more traditional financial terms some products that aren't available here and that would hamper innovation and new business growth here. So great exchange, great questions, great answers on both parts.
The one thing I will add to that is just that Ted Budd really did want to lean in and get to the answer of like, okay, then where else would they go? And right now, I mean, there are people that are fleeing the US to go develop products in Portugal, Germany, Japan, Singapore. I mean, they have a number of different places they can go to that have the technological infrastructure to be able to develop effective products, solutions, projects within cryptocurrency. And when he got to that end statement of unquestionably, like, it was made really apparent that like we need to be acting and we need to be acting now, because otherwise it's going to be too late, and all of these other countries are going to have their big advantage on us going forward into the future, and they want financial technology to be deployed and come and originate from the United States. Now, Chris, there is one person that I was really eagerly looking forward to hearing from in this. And no, I know that you think I'm going to say Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. I actually don't care what she says about anything. But who I was looking forward to hearing from is crypto's biggest critic, which is Representative Brad Sherman from the great state of California. And good old Brad had some of the dumbest comments of the entire hearing. And just a quick disclaimer for you guys. If you're not joining us on Facebook, our slide actually reads, "Elderly man falls off of soapbox." Brad's campaigns have been funded for years. Literally every single reelection campaign he has had in the state of California that he's not lost, all of them have been funded by credit unions and banks. So understand, he is coming at this being provided a script from these financial institutions. It's really important. So, Representative Brad, I call my bank daddy, Sherman, said the following. First, I want to remind the chamber today we hear from the crypto advocates. We will at some point hear from the crypto critics. We won't hear from the CEOs. We'll hear from the academics with their pencils and pens. Making valuable use of your time, are you, Brad? The next thing that Brad said, I thought was the highlight of the entire thing. And before I get too far into it, I want to just go ahead and say at the end of this, he accidentally says crypto coin. He meant to say Cobra coin, but he's incompetent. So he says the number one threat to crypto is crypto. Bitcoin could be displaced by Ether, which could be displaced by Dodge. He actually said Dodge, didn't say Doge, which could be displaced by Hamster coin. And then there's Cobra coin. And what could Mongoose coin do to crypto coin? What an argument, right? This is exactly why we need people in Congress to learn instead of just be in the pocket of financial institutions, because people like this smile with a joker like grin across their face when they're giving these testimonies and asking these questions and feeling like they're, primed. But the reality is that they know nothing about what they're talking about. The final statement that Representative good old Brad Sherman brought is it's not fair to compare fiat currency's current system to cryptocurrency's aspired system. The vibe of crypto is a stick it to the man vibe, but in actuality, it's controlled by big tech and Wall Street. So there's a lot there, right, Chris? Like there's a lot that we can unpack and just disassemble and really strangle to death, but we need to get to the bottom of it. Like, is there anything in here that we should expand upon or take apart for a second?
Oh, 100%. And it's in that last statement. In the first sentence, he says it's not fair to compare fiat's current system to crypto's aspired system. And I guarantee you, right? I haven't seen all of what he said, like the expanded, but I guarantee you he doesn't expand on that because what he really means is it's not fair to compare fiat currency to a better system of currency because that's just going to hurt me and my business interests. And to continue with that, he actually does make a somewhat accurate point, which is to a certain degree, crypto is controlled by big tech and Wall Street. What I mean by that isn't the tech behind it, but it's the money, right? We always cheer when Michael Saylor buys another 100 million in Bitcoin and everyone gets hyped. But what they don't realize is that is another incredibly wealthy person removing more Bitcoin permanently from the pool because there is no way Michael Saylor even dreams of selling that for years. And so to that point, I get what he's saying. But it's very clear here that he realizes how outmatched fiat is with all this new innovation coming out of crypto. And he is clearly, that poison apple of the bunch. You have all these proponents of crypto here, these hands off, approach to crypto. And he is clearly the poison apple. You bite into him, he makes everything sound bad, look bad, and then you don't want to touch it or even hear more.
And I'm actually going to push back on you because I did hear a couple of different points after good old Brad spoke. And I actually think that it's a really good point that it's not controlled by big tech and Wall Street. Big tech and Wall Street have their hands in it, but they do not have control of the reins. Okay, we're talking about broader cryptocurrency here. We're not just talking about Bitcoin. We're not just talking about Ethereum. We're talking about it all. So let me go ahead and break this down in just 1 second. Sorry, we had some background noise. So the biggest response of which came from my favorite new representative from Ohio, Anthony Gonzalez, who, in no less words, absolutely dunked on Sherman. So two quick disclaimers. Gonzalez definitely plays NBA Jam. Okay. And the illustration that we have on screen right now for those that are not taking the time to come and join us on YouTube, which by the way, if you're listening to the recast, come watch this on YouTube. Man, we have fun over here. But our image is showing Brad Sherman playing NBA Jam, dunking on Brad Sherman, shouting boom shakalaka into the rafters. Incredible work there. Not going to pat myself on the back much more than that. The second disclaimer is this: Brad Sherman is definitely going to be placed on injured reserve after this dunk and may, in fact, miss his reelection campaign in the spring. So just be mindful of that before you see what Anthony had to say. Anthony said, I'm going to attempt to respond to some of these objections, which I believe demonstrate a complete and utter misunderstanding of what we're even doing here today. One contention is that the vibe of crypto is a stick it to the man vibe, but in actuality, it's controlled by big tech and Wall Street. The notion that a handful of big tech leaders and Wall Street banks somehow created and now control crypto is absurd on its face. And frankly, anyone that would make such a claim should be ignored on this topic. Mic drop. This guy absolutely said it the way that it needed to be said. Brad Sherman does not understand what he's talking about and needed to be told that. And frankly, he needed to address the rest of the chamber to 100% make it known that Brad Sherman does not know what he's talking about. Please disregard it. It should not influence your decision making as a lawmaker because he is not going to be making decisions in Congress for much longer. There's a massive push in California right now to get him to get his opposition elected in the upcoming campaign. I am really looking forward to that day, Chris.
Oh, me too. We will pop NFT bottles of champagne
Oh,
in the metaverse.
it's gonna be great. I've already planned on breaking out the Dom. It's gonna be a big day for our world. But let's jump into the last of the statements here to round out the aftershock. Walking away from this, a lot of the chamber agreed that legislators need more education on crypto. If they're not going to be closed minded to it, that's a big win. And blockchains are as much about transparency as they are about security. Long time, Chris, we've heard that, they're against it because they want to protect investors. This is and they're also against it because they think it's where a lot of crime is being held. This statement, I think, ties everything together really well and says that a lot of our preconceived notions are not there. I mean, do you gather that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and it's something we talk about a lot. And you and Richard talked about on Tuesday, right? Is there a lot of misconceptions around crypto, right? You have media spreading FUD, and you have a lot of just general misinformation, right? People think all crypto is bad for the environment, when in reality, Bitcoin is really the only one that has a significant negative impact. The rest of them really don't use enough energy to make a difference in any way. And I think that's just one example of, essentially what they're saying here in summary, which is we don't know that much. Most people here don't know that much. We need to kind of leave our, instincts, our preconceived notions at the door, come in with an open mind and learn, and then say, all right, how can we, work with crypto, work with this new system to better the country as a whole? And I love that take, right? The general direction, and you can see it here, of not just Republicans, but also it seems some of the younger Democrats. I like that direction, which is if we don't know anything, let's wait, let's learn more. Because in reality, why should they rush to regulate this? There's no need to. And at the end of the day, a rushed regulation is far worse than waiting and making the right call at the end of the day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Um, Before we go much further, and I do want to expand on the last couple of points that we have here, we do have some breaking news we actually need to cover. So, cue the drop.
Breaking news.
Chinese corporation Evergrande has officially defaulted on its loans.
Again,
Not again. They were covered the first time. The Chinese government stepped in and paid off the banks,
oh,
but they've officially defaulted on their payments. So I would not be shocked if we start seeing some pullback in the market. In fact, I thought right before this, I saw Ethereum pulling back a little bit. But what people need to understand at the end of the day is that, and I think that we didn't talk about this enough when the Evergrande issue came up the first time around, Evergrande is not going to make or break this market because ultimately it's a Chinese corporation. The second that China decides that they want to control it, they're going to say, hey, we need this now. And that's probably what's going to happen here. Um, is it maybe an indicator of where the market's headed and that we're going to see more defaults? Potentially. But for right now, it is not that big of a deal. Don't overreact to this news. Chris, any thoughts on that immediately?
not really. I mean, we've discussed Evergrande, we've discussed China before, and at the end of the day, because China is still very resistant to crypto. Main reason, of course, being that they want everyone in China to use the digital yuan when that comes out. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it really doesn't mean anything. It's not like the US is coming out and Apple is defaulting on their loans, right? It's not some major multinational corporation that is based in a crypto friendly country, right? This is a real estate company in China, which is not a crypto friendly country at the moment. So at the end of the day, yes, we will see the market pull back, but not for anything actually related to crypto. It's just going to be an impact to all markets as a whole from a major multi-billion dollar corporation and the largest economy in the world defaulting.
Yeah, that was exactly where I was actually about to take it. So I'm glad that you did. It it's important to know that when you see a pullback in crypto because of news like this that on its face isn't attached to crypto, it's because crypto is responding to the overall economic markets fluctuating. That sometimes gets lost in terms of these FUD cycles. So just keep that in mind. But let's tie this one off on Congress's crash course on crypto. Ted Budd did, in fact, make a closing remark saying that it feels as though regulators seem to believe that every single coin comes under their remit and effectively that they're going to ruin this industry. This is, of course, referring to the SEC and the CFTC and every single other agency in our government that believes they have claim to it. Um, I would have to agree on the front, like the front part of this is like, yes, right now, as it stands, every single agency believes that this is under their purview. It is not. It is under maybe the CFTC, right? I mean, like, could you still make the case that some of these are securities or that we should be making a category of digital securities so as to not just strike them from existence?
Yes, easily. And I say easily just because, a lot of tokens that are out there function very similar to voting shares in stocks, right? And that is directly under what the SEC deals with. That being said, it doesn't apply to all of the coins, or honestly, probably not even a majority, right? But I think you can definitely make a case that some of them do. To the second half of what he was saying, though, and when I first read this, I thought he was saying that, oh, that these you know, supervisory bodies, organizations. That's the word I was looking for. The organizations would ruin this industry. I first thought he was talking about crypto, which he may be, but it seems to me after rereading it that he means crypto is going to come in and ruin the industries those organizations oversee and therefore make them obsolete. And I have a feeling that is part of the reason you're seeing everyone and their mother's organization come in and want to regulate it so that they have a reason to keep existing. Not
And
that I agree with that in any way.
I think that you could probably read it both ways and it wouldn't be untrue.
Yes,
Um,
completely agree with you there.
like this is true in that a lot of these agencies, if they don't get actual clarity on what they're supposed to be regulating, it's almost undeniable that they're going to ruin this industry. But at the same time, their industry as lawmakers, they will be ruined if this doesn't get cleared up because they're going to be cutting at each other's throats trying to lay claim at every next turn. Um, yeah, it's really interesting. Anyway, the last comment that I want to leave us on before we own this and have some final remarks is that Warren Davidson, who's a representative from Ohio, said the crypto law should not be an interpretive art. It needs new, clear rules. I think I disagree with him, and I want to give you the first take at this, and then I'll get into why I think I disagree.
I kind of agree, but I agree with him from a law standpoint, right? For any of our international viewers, and I don't know how laws are written in your country, but in the US, laws are still written as if they were written 200 years ago. Most lawyers or even judges today couldn't read through a law and clearly translate it to English because that's how convoluted a lot of the language is. I would love to see, because inevitably there will be regulation around crypto, clear cut language that anyone can look at and understand, because it takes away a lot of the fear. Oh, am I breaking the rules? Am I doing this properly or not properly? when it's clear cut and you can just understand it by looking at it, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I would agree. The big thing to me is that you need to have a distinction, I guess, between what is rule of law and what can be applied in the current model. We have frameworks that apply to a lot of what is currently out there. But the problem is that it hasn't been immediately and clearly stated. And like the links have not been clearly defined. So they need to write like clarifying points, but I'm not necessarily sure that they need entirely new, clear regulations and rules. I think they just need clarification to clear up what is currently gray area. Um, we don't, the thing that I keep coming back to, and I think it's becoming more and more apparent to me, and I didn't think this way originally, Chris, is that we need a new agency to fully govern crypto.
Completely agree. And
Like that was my original opinion, is like that is what we needed. I don't think that's the case anymore.
I think it would make things a lot easier. I think it would make things a lot easier if the right people were involved. For example, if the government somehow could rope in, Sam Bankman-Fried and Vitalik Buterin and said, "Hey guys, you're both incredibly successful in crypto. You've made ungodly amounts of money. You clearly understand it. You understand the markets and the industry. How about you come and advise our new organization so that we can understand it and properly regulate it as you guys, would like to still see innovation." But knowing the US, that's not going to happen. And if we had one, agency running everything around regulations with crypto, they would probably pack the board with Wells Fargo CEOs and board members and executives.
Well, yeah, if Brad Sherman had anything to do with it. The truth is that I think that all of Congress is getting really tired of the excuses and of like the internal infighting because of who is in whose pocket. And I think I'm not saying that these days are done. I'm just saying that these days are starting to be called to light, right? Like people are taking ownership of the fact that, the credit unions and the banks own Brad Sherman and probably everything that he owns, um, along with a number of other representatives that are currently clearly corrupt, and their interests are just those of the organizations that fund them. Um, all are really, really important things to take ownership. But I think my biggest takeaway out of this entire hearing is that the future of crypto in the US actually looks pretty good right now. Would you agree with that, or do you disagree?
Completely agree. And the biggest reason I agree is that we're seeing a lot of positive energy come out of the Republican side of our Congress. And with the way that Joe Biden's first 2-ish years are going to have gone, it will probably be a Republican majority by 2024. So that is a good sign for crypto. And of course, that is all I'm talking about here. I'm not going to get political, bring in other opinions, but from just a crypto perspective, things are looking pretty good from a regulatory standpoint and who will probably be making those rules in office a few years from now.
The last thing I'll leave you with is this, and that's that I think one other encouraging thing that's coming out of this is that more and more legislators want to be bipartisan. Um, that is something that we have not seen in probably 12 years. And I am very eager about that because I think that not only will that make for better legislation, I think it'll also make for a happier American public. Um, Again, all of this is non political talk. This is just my observation of society. Um, Partisan politics don't make for happy people. It just
Nope.
doesn't. But look, we are not a show about politics. We're a show about crypto. And that is what we are here to talk about. So that has been our Aftershock segment for this week. If you enjoyed it, let us know in the comments. If you think that any one of the comments that were made by our politicians was particularly great and we missed it, or you liked one of the comments that you heard, let us know in the comments. We want to hear from you. We want to get your take. We want to make sure that we're including you in these shows. Of course, every single week we're here at 7 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday and Thursday, live on YouTube. You can catch the recast through any of the podcast platforms that you prefer. Um, on Thursdays for our Tuesday show and on Saturdays for our Thursday show, now that I can actually remember our schedule. But that is going to wrap it up for the Aftershock